How could you be free if you're attached to things? The most free I've ever been in my life was when I was making 20 grand a month as a trainer. I was really good at what I did. I was exceptionally sad. I was a sad person because I felt like my life was going down the drain. The only metrics of growth that I had was wealth. If I saw 10K up this month, big man, I could walk with a smile. But when I lost clients, everything under the surface started to come up. All the dialogues about myself, all the insecurities, all of the doubts, the dreams started to come back, the nightmares, reoccurring ones that I couldn't run from. And then also all of those feelings that I had against myself that I never wanted to confront because of what it would say about me. So there was at this point in my life when I became the most free, and this is something you guys are going to pretty much do, which is I want you to be free, is when I detached myself from the most amount of outcomes and I started living in the present. It sounds cliche, but I want to get into what that really means. I went from making 20 grand a month to 2 grand a month, and I started hanging out with somebody who was not financially stable. But let me tell you one thing. There was nobody more authentic in the world than that person. It was like I hung out with Peter Pan. I went to Neverland. It was the same reality. I went to the same gym. Did the same things that I do every day, but how did my reality change so much? The person that you are, the most free version of yourself, is the most dark, selfish, voyeuristic, manipulative version of you. That is the freest version of you. And how did I know that I was able to identify this? Because the reason why I was working the training job and the reason why I was there not going out every night, to give you a contrast, I was going out every night with this guy. I wore a suit when I went out. I started spending my money for me. I started interacting with everybody around me at the boardwalk, at the cafe, at the gas station. And I started telling people what I do, and it wasn't training. I started helping people with their problems, and I got really good at just to the next person that I had the opportunity to say what I did because I got better and better at my pitch about what I did for people. And it would change sometimes, and sometimes it would expand, and sometimes people go, well, that's interesting. I want your Instagram. I want to see your stuff. So I went from people scoffing at what I did to going, holy shit, I think this is it. I feel something from you. I was playing the fool. Other things that I stumbled on, I stumbled on love for the first time in my life. Never experienced that. Something that's changed me. It wasn't with the perfect Miss Sunshine. It was with Miss Tattoo, who is clinically depressed but is so open and honest. I didn't even need to care about bringing her over for Shabbat because she was just like me. She was bold, outgoing, an exceptional dancer. Every second I spent with her was like on clouds. The friend that I had, it wasn't the Mr. Rich that I used to hang out with before. It was actually Mr. Broke, who thrift shops and has had the same job since he was 18. But nobody can communicate like this guy can communicate. Nobody had the intuition like this guy had. He could play video games at 26 years old and not hate himself. That is amazing to me. I was like, that's greatness. He could play Halo 2 with me at 3 a.m. in the morning. If that's not greatness, you know what happens to most guys that are in my age now, that are working hard? I'm like, come on, let's play some Call of Duty. And they're like, bro, I don't do video games anymore. And I'm like, I already know you're going to go broke. And like the next year you're going to go broke. You're going to lose your mind. And then after you lose your mind, after having this relationship, then you're going to pick up the sticks. And I'll tell you why. Your resistance to these things is because you don't want to be perceived as that person that enjoys it. Because what if you enjoy it? Oh no. And then you find yourself constantly playing video games and your life deteriorates because you're so weak and everything that you've worked hard at never really mattered. I've seen it. It's crazy. But I noticed what actually trapped me were the ideals that I wanted in my life. What did I tell myself I wanted? Well, I told myself that I wanted to, make money, open my gym, have a bunch of trainers under me, keep people with the same kind of ambition. That's what I told myself I wanted before. Do you also know what I told myself I wanted before? Well, I wanted a wife and kids, and I'm saving up the money for a house, and then we can get a nice down payment. I saved up for a nice down payment, and I could pay the mortgage. And how was I living my life then versus how was I living my life after, when I stopped letting my ego destroy me? Your ego will allow you to only experience the things that you know. And it will tell you that you're growing because you're discovering some of the things that you don't know, that you know you don't know. But you will never ever grow, and you will start to feel it get tighter and tighter around your throat until eventually you start to feel your emotional ability begin to drop off. The amount of emotions that you experience in general begins to subside. You start to feel less and less humanity. Humanity is composed of darkness, it's composed of rage, it's composed of fear, it's composed of depression. For a serious point in my life, I never allowed myself to experience those emotions. I constantly reject those emotions. So which means that on a subconscious level, I'm experiencing all of those things, and it started to age me. I started to go bald. I started to lose the health in my fingernails, the density of my skin. I had a skin disease. Sure, I was muscular as fuck, but I could actually notice every little thing about myself that was falling apart, and I could not help it but to realize that perhaps maybe I'm dying, because I feel like I'm dying. Emotionally, I felt like I was dead. So I met this guy. I just stopped training my clients. I saw my brother get married to a girl you probably should never get married to. And then I realized that maybe for the first time in my life, I should start experiencing my authentic desires without the care or the perception or the attachment that I had for my life. I didn't care who I was. I wanted to be free one day. Just one day. I wanted to do the things that I actually called for. The things that challenged me. And perhaps maybe the things that didn't challenge me because I was indifferent. I had no ego. I was existing free. I felt, and for the first time, vulnerable. And with that vulnerability.
How did you realize then that you had this big ego? And like normally with all these emotions, you don't know it. And then for me, it's like in 1 second, and it's like a thought pops into your head. What if it's maybe a tiny bit? And then I realized that it's always like a tiny bit, and then it's actually a huge bit, but it's just a tiny bit you see. And you think, nah, I'm not narcissistic. No, not at all. No, maybe a tiny bit. Maybe I can admit to myself, maybe a tiny bit. And then after you inquire into it, you realize, oh fuck, I'm really narcissistic.
Yeah.
Like, this was my experience, but
that's huge.
For you that you realized that then?
Yeah, wow, that's fucking. I mean, honestly, when I spoke with you, I was like, my God, this kid has so much in common with me. You know, the thing I rejected the most was my mother, and the thing that you reject the most is your father. And I noticed that it affected my relationships, but for you, it really affects your relationship with yourself, with the opposite sex, right? It affects it in a very similar way because parental stuff and confusion is really difficult. My mother was manic depressive, very critical, very harsh, and in a lot of ways was willing to just watch herself burn every day. And I just couldn't stand that. And very masculinized over a long period of time. And I just was like, I became great feeling masculine, or whatever the fuck that meant. And my relationship with myself on a feminine aspect, my relationship with my emotions, my sensitivity, I was manic depressive. I'd have the best smile for everybody. And deep down, dude, I just wanted to cry and like unzip my suit and go into a corner and melt. That's how I felt. I felt so alone. So there was something you mentioned. I'll get to your question in a second. And it's like, how did you know when your ego was taking over? I want you to write this down. It's called openness to new experiences. This saved my life. And perhaps openness to old experiences that you believe you're above. That also changed my life. So what were the few things that I noticed about my friend? Well, one of them is I detached. From what? From my ideals. What was that? Well, that was wealth. That was marriage. It was family. It was community. Oh my God, I detached from that. The next thing that happened right under it was I put an emphasis on my authentic desires. I also didn't hold myself above anything. Do you know what I used to do when I was 21? Video games? Excuse me, I got Matthew McConaughey Road Trip to read. Or Green Lights, that was the book I really liked. Or excuse me as I watched my Jordan Peterson video. Do you think I watched any of these videos because I actually cared about the information? For a point of time I did. There was also another point of time where I didn't because I wanted to tell other people that I spent the last 6 hours watching these videos and you didn't. Do you think I listened to a podcast? Or did I listen to a podcast to create distance between other people? Because every day that I did this over others, I felt power and significance. So what was at the bottom line? The bottom line was I never felt significant and I never felt power. What I do is I often like to attach. How did I know I was manipulative? Well, I'll tell you very simply. I made this vow of abstinence. This vow of abstinence at this period of my life was something I used as a method of control. What was that method of control for? Well, if I'm actually going to be here to hold myself to this sexual standard, then I'll meet my wife. Right? See, everything is an outcome. Nothing's sincere. Nothing's authentic. So what did that tell me about me? Well, I'm psychotic. Why? I can't live with humanity. My emotions aren't really emotions. They're just there to create other people's ability to connect with me, and then I can get what I want from them. The past relationship I was in before I went abstinent was a relationship to where I found the most agreeable woman on planet Earth, and I told her all of the things that she wanted to be. I didn't even know that at 19, 20. I didn't even know that about myself. I knew it after the relationship, when I had a girl screaming her fucking eyes out with all the hatred that she had in her lungs that I never seen my whole life. And then I was like, ooh, okay, something happened there. I could point the finger at her. I could, you know what my ego wanted to do? Fucking bitches these days. I wanted to find a bunch of other men that had that thing, and let's go make money and work out and drive sports cars. Yeah, that would have been great. You would have never seen me before. And not because you would have never seen my Instagram. You probably would. It would just be doing some bullshit. But you would have never actually seen who I am as Naftali Moses. And I realized something very fascinating here, is that your ego is part of who you are. You need to voluntarily break it down so that you can see what you're protecting with it. And then you could bring that into the light, because that's who you are, really. And then at that point, you can take your ego and place it where it needs to be. You cannot get rid of your ego. If you want to influence the world, you need to have an ego. I don't care what anybody else tells you, oh, ego is a problem. Their definition of ego is the problem. Ego is what helps people understand who you are. When your ego becomes inflated, it blocks who you are. So you see the problem is actually there to help you function, and that you need to be able to pay attention to it. It's like vines on a house. It's the thing that allows you to show up and clean the house. But also, if you don't pay enough attention, it will cover the home completely. And then you'll become lost, and you'll feel like a cold little boy in a dark room who's been locked away from the light. So dark and deep down in whatever this dungeon is, this wet, cold sewer. And that's where he'll be, and that's where your humanity is. And it's there because you've never allowed yourself to experience it. So the ideals, I detach from the ideals. Well, why did I detach from the ideals? Because perhaps maybe I needed to experience the devil that I am. There was a few characters that I looked up to, and I recommend that you guys do it. And it's a really powerful thing, especially to start connecting to emotions. Look at the characters that you look up to. What does it say about you? If you ever watch Netflix TV shows or perhaps even film, for sure TV, and even books, whatever it is, look at the characters that you resonate with and start establishing what about those characters do I really desire. So my whole life, how did I know I had an ego? I'll tell you, I never fully committed. I never fully committed to myself. You know what I would do? I would just get good enough at my game, and I would just utilize just enough of my darkness to get what I needed. I would never fully unleash. I never fully see what I was capable of. I was tactical. You know, when it came to my time where I was actually a huge womanizer, whatever you want to call it, when I was from ages 16 to 20, I would only utilize what I needed to get an outcome. I would never rip off that veil to see what I was. I would always use it half-assed. Why? Because I was still surviving. Your ego is going to keep you surviving. And I want you to remember that. It will never keep you finding love, success, wealth, and authenticity. It'll keep you surviving. And so what was another indicator of why my ego was so big is I didn't become focused on what I could do. I became focused on what I can get from others. Big difference. So there was a point in my life where I was always smooth and could speak to people, or not always, something I actually really worked on. But I was 21 years old, and this is what I want you to be open to, is that if you're really open to having your ego broken, you're going to feel like you just got jumped by a bunch of jungle cats when it does happen. And I just want you to be ready for that. Because there's a lot of insecurities that come up to the surface. And I'll tell you, there's a few things that I said. Remember on the calls, like, you're a psychopath? And you just laughed. You're like, what made you say that? And it was like, well, because there's a lot of emotions you haven't allowed yourself to experience because of a need for control that you need to have in order to be successful and to have this great life. But exactly what is that? That's your ego. That's not actually your higher self telling you that you want a good life. That's all protective.
It's always like I can't really completely know, but the thing is, I had like a relationship for like half a year, and there I was really connecting with her and everything, and I have like, when we had my first time, I lost my virginity and everything. I had like extreme anxiety to lose my virginity, and then I was like, I had like extreme anxiety there, and then I thought like, Do I just lie to her and tell her, oh no, it's no problem, I can't do it right now, but whatever. But luckily I didn't do that, and I told her exactly, hey, I have this anxiety, I was vulnerable with her, and she really accepted that, and well, it's maybe not the most masculine, but it's more real or something. And
Yeah, it is real, and it is
obviously
masculine.
the problem now is like I can't know if I'm lying to myself or if, like normally the actions define you, and this action of me being vulnerable there would speak to the opposite, if not having this huge ego. But obviously you don't know exactly. It's very hard to know.
Well, you saw you caught yourself there. You do have a level of awareness, and you really do want to grow. A part of you, and a value that you had, a belief that you had, made you do it. Because you could have just lied and been like, hey, you could have actually even been cruel, right? And been like, I don't know, you kind of smell weird. I've seen people do crazy shit. When people feel very powerful emotions, or perhaps maybe they're in a position to be rejected, what's the first thing they do? They get harsh and critical with you. They start to discredit you before you discredit them, right? It's like you're the fat kid who's really insecure about himself, and then somebody goes, hey, I like your shirt, and then you're immediately like, oh my God, he's about to say I'm fat, and instead you call them fat, and you're like, all right, man, your hairline's running away from your forehead, and you just start roasting them. And it's like, well, that's exactly what the insecure person does, is he immediately fears the rejection and starts rejecting the other person. But you saw that the alternative here, because there's a value. I want you to identify that too. That's part of a lot of what we do here, is we identify our values, because we can really start utilizing those in the midst of those high pressure moments, right? And you're like, well, it might not be very masculine. The most masculine thing you can do is say the truth and stand by it. It's the most masculine thing you can do as a man. Say the truth and stand by it. And so what really actually helped me with my whole ego, and this was a thing for you, it's actually, you're very good in relationships, and you have a very intuitive part of you, and you were telling me this, that you're very sensitive, and you could feel a lot of what other people are experiencing, right? But for you, it's on the flip side of things. It's going to be in the taking action part of your life, more than when the things come to you and dealing with it, which shows you that you're actually very, very close to the kind of place that you want to be. But it's going to be that consistent action, that discipline, that driven, determined, and resilient individual that you're trying to become in the face of the success that you want, while experiencing humanity in the midst of it, because that's how you create the full archetype of the leader. So what really actually helped me break out of this was a friend that I met before I met the Peter Pan friend. And he was somebody who right off the bat didn't tell me the things that I wanted to hear. Now, there's one thing that will allow everybody to change in this group, and it's called trust. The more that you trust me and the things that I'm saying, that I really have your best interest at heart, the more you will change. Trust is something that's very internally mirrored. I'm a part of you, right? I'm perhaps maybe the part of you that you have to believe at this point is good and there for you. Or as somebody that's just trying to enforce their own ideas onto you and is secretly miserable. I could be your worst projections. I could be the thing that you're the most fearful of. But I also could be that voice that you are praying for, that could help wake you up to the life that you could be living, right? So there's always like a ratio here. There's something going on. There's some sort of risk reward, but the reward has to be that much better than the risk for you in order to be willing to take that risk. So there's a friend that I met, and the first thing he told me was that my tiger's locked in a cage. And then the next thing he told me after that was that I'm Tyler Durden. I'm just a figment of my twin brother's imagination. And then the third thing he told me is, and he told this with the most severity, you're either dumb as fuck or you lie to yourself every day. And so I tell it to you, you either have a really massive ego when it comes to really putting yourself out there in the face of the world, or you're just looking for an outcome from everybody to tell you those things about yourself. And that perhaps maybe you're lying to yourself. And that's the thing, that's the don't know you don't know. So when my friend told me this...
What do you mean about I didn't really understand the two options right there.
Well, there's a parallel here, right? That you're either really afraid of putting yourself out there fully and authentically, or you're somebody that continues to lie to themselves and get other people to tell him the things that he wants to hear, as he stays exactly where he is 5 years later. And another 60 more hours a day or a month of information to make you feel like you're okay. Right now what I'm realizing is that there is this fear of stepping out, stepping in. There's a lot that needs to be cleaned up. There's a lot that needs to be discovered. There's actually a lot of your ego that needs to be placed appropriately, and there's a lot under it because there's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of fear of not being enough. There's a lot of being hurt. There's a lot of hearing the things that you're the most afraid of from others around you that you desire to be around. And that's exactly how it works. In perfect contrast is the things that you feel so much resistance to, and the things that you're the most afraid of are actually the things that you should be discovering. And it should not be convenient. It's not convenient. It's precise, typically. So I went pale for a week, and then that's actually when I started that journey. And I started realizing I am lying to myself, and I'm not dumb as fuck, right? I had all of my friends tell me, hey, watch out for that guy. And I said, no, that might be the only friend I have at the moment. And that's still one of my friends to this day. One of my very closest friends. I see him almost every day. And there's nothing he does not support me in. So I often notice that it is very difficult to start this, but perhaps maybe we are attached to certain things that don't allow us to be free. I want you to realize the reality that you have in front of you, not the fantasy that you've made love to for years. The fantasy you've made love to for years is its own form of sabotage, because it's not life. I always told myself, well, if there's another party that you can be at with another group of people that you can be with, why would I be here? When I started realizing that perhaps maybe this is the only party I'll be at with the only group of people that I'll be with, I'll show up for it, and I'll meet my needs here. Why is one environment better than another? Well, truthfully, it's not the case. Actually, you just change your behavior based off the environments that you're in. And that's why you don't see the results that you want to see, and that you tell yourself, well, it's perhaps in the other environment. All of these things are protective, and I want you guys to get down to the bottom of the things that you are protecting. So now we'll kind of get into that. The detaching part. This part's the hardest part. Why is it the hardest part? Well, because it requires an authentic behavior regardless of all outcomes. It is actually for you and purely for you. You are doing things to create an individual that has been repressed over years. You are trying to discover parts of yourself, and the way that you're going to discover those parts of yourself isn't through mindlessly journaling. It's through intentionally going out into the world and discovering the parts of yourself with other people around you. Trust is the most important thing that you can start learning how to develop, especially as a young man. You guys need to learn how to trust others. I promise you there is nothing more sacred than that. You won't be hopeful, but you'll start realizing why you aren't as trusting as you should be, and perhaps maybe why you don't meet people to where they want to meet you. So, the loneliest I've ever been was that period of my life where I had the biggest ego. I often notice that this goes hand in hand with your darkness. And I believe that our darkness is something that really needs to be incorporated. I haven't really spoken about it with, I think I've got a little bit of that. We speak a lot about the shadow. Just the capacity by which the shadow is, we're not willing to investigate, right? Would you guys be willing to fully experience your shadow? It's not an easy answer. It's really not an easy answer. Because I can show you when I utilized my shadow before, or my authenticity, because a lot of your authentic self is in the shadow. I used it as a party trick to get what I wanted, to show other people what I was. And again, that was my ego, still hanging out in there, focus on perception, trying to control everything. I could tell you the contrast by somebody who fully unleashed that shadow versus somebody who used it as a survival mechanism, okay? When I would meet girls before, and this is going to sound very graphic, I would meet girls and do the nice shenanigans. Oh, hey, what's up? Get her number, say a few lines, make her laugh, make other guys feel shame, and then talk to her on the phone, text her for hours, add her to her roster. When I completely unleashed my shadow and my authentic desires, it went from 5 minutes meeting somebody to taking them home in my car. The amount of capacity that I have increased by my willingness to go there with myself was important. And I'm going to tell you guys this, and you're going to love this. When I was performative when I was 20, versus then when I was 22, when I was really starting this unleashing game, what would I really want to do when I first met the girl? Well, what I did when I fully unleashed. So do you see the thing here, guys? What you really want to be focusing on and what you really want to be paying attention to are the things that you really want to do that you don't do, and instead you perform for them and for yourself, not allowing yourself to see what you really wanted to do. And it's called unleashing. It's when you do not hesitate to the things that you desire the most. You know, it's often the time you're like, oh, I'm going to go ask for a raise, right? Or I'm going to start charging more for the product that I have. And what do? We increase it by a little bit. But if you fully started taking responsibility for your life, you would charge the number that you believe you're worth. And it's not $100 or $200 more. It's 3 times as much as you charge. What scares you more? What scared me more was me. Everything that I could be scared the fuck out of me. When I was 21, I could see those things in my head, and I could not believe them. And I would judge them. I would judge who I was. I would see the things that I could do in the world, and I would get rid of it. I would see myself speaking. I would see myself doing that weird-ass seduction shit, and I'd reject it. Because I was afraid of the journey that I would have to be on from 21 to 24 in order to get here. And by the way, from 21 to 26, or for the rest of my life. There was a lot of fear of that, and I'll tell you why. Because in order for you to get to that point, there's going to be so many times to where you get rejected, to where you do fail. And are you willing to make love with that rejection for yourself to see what you're made of? I knew one thing for certain. I could not sleep. I could not sleep unless I seen what I was capable of. Do you know what I used to do? It's what I told my friend who told me my tiger was locked in a cage that day. I told him the kind of things that I could do. I said, dude, you don't know who I am. My ego kicked up. And I said, if I wanted to get a girl on the street, I could get her in my car. Is that true? Or is that what I want it to be true? That's what I want it to be true. And you know what else I told him? If I wanted to be rich, I'd be making millions right now. Was that true? Or is that what I wanted to be true? Truth be told, my ego never allowed me to realize that if I tried, it would be difficult. And more difficult than I thought it would be. The truth is did I really want it? You don't want to know how I knew I really wanted it? I was willing to get rejected as many times as it took. And I was willing to watch my ego fall apart until I even questioned if I wanted it. Do you know what a lot of us are afraid of? Perhaps not wanting the things we've trained ourselves to want for the many years that we have. And perhaps maybe living an authentic life is actually threatening and not so comforting.